Good. Time for us now to get into a conversation on the National Tree Planting Day that is scheduled for Friday. And of course, also in remembrance of the flood victims of the rains that continue to pound different parts of the country, although the weatherman says that they are subsiding. And joining me in studio is George Tarus, who is the Conservation Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Joe.
You're welcome. Let's talk about, before we even talk about the plans by government this year, last year there was a similar exercise, taking stock. What is the progress so far?
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me commensurate with Kenyans who've lost their lives and their property.
Yes.
Like you rightly said, this is the second national event that we've planned as government to be able to rally everybody to go out there and plant trees. Last year, on 13th of November, we did have another national holiday, precisely dubbed as the first green holiday, to be able to set ourselves to work towards ensuring that our landscape have at least 15 billion trees in the next 10 years. So when we went out there, we were able to plant over 300 million seedlings during that day. Of course, there are also quite a number of other lessons we learned in the process, some of which now is informing the second national holiday that we are about to roll out in Friday. But of course, we may not say that we launched it and stopped. We've been doing quite a number of other activities to ensure that we are ready to walk the long journey, because 10 years is not a short period of time. And part of what we've been looking at is how best do we reorganize our efforts so that we are working in a very systematic, organized manner that is bringing everyone. And that's why we are dubbing this initiative the whole of society, the whole of government, and the whole of our partner approach, where each one of us, of course, the executive leading from the front, but telling each one of us, individual Kenyans, corporate, private citizens, to work with us to ensure that our landscapes are basically restored. Because we've learned, and I think it's unfortunate that this flood has gone to the extremes, but I think it is a testament as to why initially the government had to think of the landscape and ecosystem restoration as its priorities. Because in so doing, we are visualizing a situation where we would not have extreme climate events, because in all honesty, we are in a climate crisis where we would be most likely moving from an extreme flood event to another drought event. And part of what scientists are guiding us on is we need to invest very heavily in tree growing as one of the nature-based solutions. So basically that was the foundation. And this was again guided by quite a substantive detailed work that we did dating back to 2015. Where we did an extensive mapping of our country, and we realized that 38.8 million hectares of our land are either in degraded and very degraded states, and therefore requires in one way or another human interventions, be it through direct tree planting, in some situation protection, and all manner of other interventions, so that we have our ecosystems, the way we've been endowed as a country. We have 7 ecosystems for the record. We have mountain ecosystems, we have wetlands, we have forest lands, we have grasslands, and all of them are not performing what they are supposed to be performing naturally. So the whole idea behind the 10-year National Ecosystem and Restoration Strategy is to ensure that each one of those are at least brought back to their pristine state, if possible, so that we are able to live through the challenges of climate change the way we are seeing it. Yeah.
You've talked about 300 million trees target that, what you did last year.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the survival rate of those trees. Okay. But I'm imagining 300 million is not even a quarter of the total target of 15 billion shillings. 15 billion trees in 10 years. But you have 10 years. Question is, when you assess the efforts of last year, vis-a-vis the process you're saying about 2015 and how you had mapped out the country, do you think we are on course towards achieving that?
Of course, the part of what was happening last year is part of the preparatory phase, looking at how our systems are fitting in together, setting up of nurseries, setting up of structures, Yes, we were able to do 300, though our target was 500 million for that short rain season. We are hopeful that this year we should be able to surpass, because each year, for us to be at the target, we should be doing 1.5 billion trees a year. So basically, we know we have some deficits of what we need to do for the last long short rains. And the plans now around this specific day, which is on Friday, is basically to rally each one of us. And His Excellency the President has given us indicative figures we have to work around, and assume if each child in Kenya was to grow 10 trees, and every adult in Kenya is to grow at least 50 trees, that means we should be able, in a single day, to grow well over a billion seedlings, which means it's possible for us to still meet our target and be on track. Of course, there are quite a number of things we noted also during our last season. We did the planting. Somehow again, we had a little bit of the dry season. So there are quite a number of areas that may not have performed optimally the way we were thinking. But with floods and the intense rainfall regimes that we've been able to experience, we are quite convinced that this time around we should see quite a number of trees that we are putting in our landscape on Friday growing into maturity.
Let me ask you, because at the beginning you said you have learned lessons.
Yes.
Comparing to the first tree planting holiday.
Yes.
What lessons did you learn from last season?
The first lesson we learned is the whole issue of coordination, and more or less government leading from the front.
Yeah.
And part of what has happened since that time is the cabinet has directed cabinet secretaries to take the front lines. Of all the cabinet secretaries, each one of them have been assigned a site to the dot. They have coordinates of where they are supposed to be restoring. They have set up a date at least once a month for them to lead from the front. And from that initiative alone, we should be able to see over 50 million trees being grown by the cabinet secretaries alone. Leave alone now, there are state institutions, there are the employees of government, the private sector. So one of the lessons that we learned was the whole issue of coordination. And what we did out of that is we have now a very robust strategy in place that has cascaded the whole process of tree growing and ecosystem restoration to ward level. We will be seeing committees operating all the way to the ward level, more or less embodying a situation where we have a whole of society and whole of government approach. So coordination was the issue number one. The next other issue was the availability of the plant material to be able to grow. So we are actually working on that, and the government has supported the capacities of Kenya Forest Service, National Youth Service, Prison Services, to be able to expand their nursery capacities so that we have adequate seedlings available. And we're also calling upon part of the CSS talk press brief was calling also on private sector, and we are working with our development partners to set up a kit of resources to be able to off-take seedlings from communities and private sector. So that's part of the trick of what we learned during the last period when we had the National Tree Growing event. Yes.
I'm still on last year's tree planting. When I looked at what CS Soipan had sent to media houses, every government office had a target, including the office of the president, the executive office of the president, the deputy president, and cascading all the way to cabinet secretaries and the departments under them. Which ministry, which department, which office appears to be well on course?
Now, all of them, I wouldn't pinpoint that none of them is doing not doing their bit. Partly what we are now tweaking a little bit is pairing, because we is pairing the technical capacity employed within the Ministry of Environment to the specific offices of government. So in the distribution of the planting sites to even the coordinates, there is a specific officer of Kenya Forest Service, there is a specific officer of KEFRE, there is a specific officer of NEMA attached to the tree growing effort, so that the requisite technical capacities are going to be provided. So that is the enhancement also that we've been able to do, because as you are aware, not everybody has the specialized skill in tree growing. So part of the reorganization, therefore, is to ensure that we provide the desired technical support as they invest their time on a monthly basis to be able to put trees into the landscape. Yes.
300 million last year.
Yes.
What is the target this year?
The target this year is, of course, 1.5. So we carried over 200, so it should be well over 1.7 billion is what we are aiming to be able to achieve. And we are hopeful now during this rainy season, with all factors being right, we should be able to have a significant number of trees put into the landscape and growth into maturity.
How are you roping in county governments, community groups and the private sector to boost, government efforts of, achieving that cover of 15 billion trees in 10 years?
So of course, the integral role of county governments and the community group societies are actually very critical. And part of the transformation that has happened between then and now is there been deliberate engagement through the Council of Governors and led by our cabinet secretaries to meet with specific county governors to have a discussion on how best they can be able to plug in. Within the 15 billion tree growing strategy, there are specific targets that county governments are also supposed to bring into the table. And I have seen enthusiasm, of course, and support from county government also to be part of the conversation, to be part of the action. And in fact, quite a number of counties have already dedicated specific ecosystems for them as targets, because the way the executive at the national level is doing. So governors are also coming out very strongly. MCAs are coming out also very strongly to be able also to lead from the front, because in so doing we should be able to rally everybody into the table. In terms of the private sector engagement, we've had a number of roundtables with the private sector under KEPSA and even our development partners. And we are engaging them basically with a view of also creating a conversation with them. Because down the road, we are looking at the sustainability. After we've planted these trees, we have a huge opportunity as a country to create very sustainable value chains around possibilities. For fruit trees, for instance, we are thinking of at least 20% of them being fruit trees. And that creates an industrial opportunity for even processing, agro-processing towards the food industry. Looking at the green construction, looking at the conversation around adding value to tree products to create green jobs and also support the whole issue of climate change. So the role of private sector, yes, at seedling production stage, but again downstream, after we put this landscape with trees, we should be able to, in a sustainable way, create opportunities for industrial transformation. If you go to countries like Sweden, you go to countries like South Africa, a huge proportion of the economy is supported by wood and wood-based industries. So that's also the kind of conversation we are thinking, whether we could again be able to start thinking through, so that out of this big initiative, we see a huge economic transformation down the road. Yeah.
Let's circle back a bit.
Yes.
The long-term survival
Yes.
of the trees being planted.
Yes.
Last year and of course this year.
Yes.
Question is, did the technology of monitoring how these trees survive work last year, so much so that you roll it out this year?
Yes, part of the technology, of course, worked. We are all recording our trees in Jazamiti. We also realized that because of the intense numbers that are also coming out of our tree growing initiative, there is need to be able to optimize. And part of what has been happening is system optimization, so that we are able to enhance our monitoring capacities and more so also be able to integrate other utilities within the ecosystem, because the idea is we would want to have other utilities around the technology, so that we have a species site matching embedded into that. You have a linkage with the possibilities of markets. You link that to nurseries where your activities. We would also link that with the possibilities of industrial, because out of that tool, we would want to see many things springing out of that. So part of what we are doing now is a system optimization to create opportunities for bigger innovation around that space. Yes.
You talked about people, for example, or companies that have seedlings, for example.
Yes.
This time, what is government doing to uptake, beyond what Kenya Forest Service is offering? Is the government really offering incentives, for example, to people who have their private, as what you'd say, nurseries, so much so that if there is a deficit in terms of the trees that KFS can offer, that you can also engage other people to provide these trees?
Yes, I think there's a little bit of also a tweak this time around.
Okay.
Last time, seedlings were freely available from KFS nurseries. There would be a little bit of an investment required by anybody who wants to plant a tree. Of course, the prices are a little bit affordable. And that's the directive that has actually been given to all government institutions, that they have to invest. And what we've done, therefore, is to map where these private nurseries are, for instance, so that any other entity that is interested, be it a government institutions, they can be able to purchase or procure seedlings from the locality of where they are restoring. The next other issue that has also come in is that it is the responsibility of also, especially the cabinet secretaries and their state agencies, to mobilize communities and see how they are able to engage local communities in their restoration effort. So the expectation out of that is we should be able to start mopping out seedlings from the private nurseries. And again, it's a conversation we've continued having with our development partners. We've had discussions with, for instance, the UN agencies and family, looking at a possibility of creating a fund where it will purely be dedicated for taking seedlings that are already existing within our private and community nurseries. So that is also another transformation that we are seeing it coming into the space. And we are also calling and urging even the private sector now to come into the fold and be able to work with us as government to ensure that we also are able to create green jobs, because nurseries in itself is an opportunity for creation of green jobs in numbers. And I know across the country we've listed and actually documented well over 1,600 nurseries that have huge capacities of seedlings already ready for uptake. And we're continuing actually in that exercise, recording, and hopefully down the road we should be able to integrate those information within Jazamiti application or the monitoring ecosystem generally, and move the story and move the restoration effort forward.
The common denominator is climate change adaptation.
Yes.
Beyond the planting of trees, the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change, what other interventions does it have to lead Kenya towards the goal of climate adaptation?
You are right. Of course, climate change is a monster that is facing all of us, and part of the government transformation to ensure that we are able to be responsive to the climate change situation is documented in what we call nationally determined contribution, which is a government blueprint of moving our economy into a climate resilience space. So part of what is happening, and more so within the forestry space, is the huge ecosystem restoration programs that we are seeing. Side by that is also now transitioning to low-intensive technologies, where again we are able to manage what is coming out of our space in terms of the climate-causing gases. But as you may be aware, nature-based solutions has been dubbed as one of the biggest opportunities for countries like Kenya to be able to live itself through the extremes of climate change. And let's contrast. If we are able to restore our lands, most likely we would have less of the runoffs. We would most likely have less of the landslides. We will most likely have less of the extremes associated with floods. If we're also able to put our landscape under trees, we would have less of the water scarce situation that we see when droughts are there. So it's one of big opportunities that we have as a country to be able to adapt and build our resilience to the climate change situation. Yes.
In less than a minute,
Yes.
on the camera, Friday morning,
Yes.
when every Kenyan wakes up,
Yes.
of course happy because of a holiday,
Yes.
what should they do in relation to this day?
I want to urge each one of us as Kenyans, we have an opportunity as a country to be able to build our future. They said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time to plant a tree is now. On Friday, I call upon each one of you to come out in large numbers. For those who are within Nairobi, there are already areas that have been mapped out for you to be able to participate in this very noble cause of tree growing. Secondly, across the country, we would see cabinet secretaries, we would see all leaders of government going out to their respective sites to be able to do the needful of planting trees. If each one of us was to do 50 trees, in that day we should be able to plant well over 1 billion trees, which is in itself an insurance against the situation that we are facing as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. George Tarus is the Conservation Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. What is important is that Friday is a National Tree Planting Day. And the target, as Tarus says, is 50 trees per individual. It will help the government and, of course, the country in achieving the tree cover that is targeted in the next 10 years. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you, Tarus, for making time for us. And we wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
This is where we put a cap on Prime Edition. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is John Jacob Curia. Lensa Odingo was our sign language interpreter.